Well, folks, a Kennedy has dropped out, and for once it wasn't out of an Oldsmobile.
Tonight I'm very pleased to welcome a man who has been an incredible champion for so many of these values that we all share, and we've shared them for a long time. I don't think too many of you people have heard of him. He's very low-key. He's a very low-key person, but he's highly respected. He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Don't you want a safe environment for your children? Don't you want to know that the food that you're feeding them is not filled with chemicals that are going to give them cancer and chronic disease? And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
First, I'd like to apologize for the tardiness of this rant. I'd like to, but I don't actually give a desiccated turd. You see, germane to the topic of today's video, and thanks to some recent time on a plane, I got a second spin at the wheel with the pinko pox. Yes, apparently the coof still exists. As such, I spent the past week and a half or so flooded with phlegm that had roughly the same viscosity as Dilophosaurus venom, having coughed up about 18 decaliters of it. Allow me to assure you I could have grouted my bathroom with that bullshit, but hey, it could have been worse. My plane could have been a Boeing. Unfortunately for me, America's news cycle is now in dog years, and as such, we've seen Kamala's cringy convention, replete with Palestine protests in the interim, lower attendance figures than an AEW house show, and I beshit you not, a mobile abortion and male sterilization center on site. Good to know elections aren't the only things Democrats are having fixed. Look, it was make or break time for cackles and cankles. They can cook all the polls and overrepresentation and response bias to black pill the podcast midwits, but internally, reports all throughout the astroturf descent of America's wine aunt have asserted consistently that she continues to trail Trump by a point or two. Look, she's in an unenviable position, and for once, it isn't at belt level in front of Willie Brown. Look, promising to correct an economy she's at least partially in charge of at present comes off more than a bit like OJ assuring us all he remains in dogged pursuit of the real murderer. But they rolled out the box wine barrel regardless. They unthawed Oprah, brought the Obama boys out of mothballs. Hell, they even cooked up enough crystal meth to get Biden to almost complete a coherent sentence. But if an astronomical infusion of newfound energy was the intent, something akin to Hillary's 12-point post-convention moonshot in 2016, the Biden administration's resident cackling casuist came up emptier than her rhetoric, enjoying the briefest of baby bumps after the convention for around 24 hours, which if you think about it is probably less time than it took Big Mike to pick out that crooked fright wig. And watching the thing, it was easy to see why it went over like Jesse Helms at the Apollo, between perpetual protests that approached the point of near rioting, not to mention a maggot souffle. What's the matter, Michelle? Just live in the concrete cube and eat the bugs. The entire ordeal had an unbridled logistical acumen we haven't seen since the Afghanistan withdrawal. I guess that's what happens when you hold your convention in Chicago, a town that fought harder to keep Chick-fil-A out of their neighborhoods than crack, where a man can approach police with a knife in his chest and still be arrested for carrying a concealed weapon. But as burn victim ugly as all that happened to be, the Bing cherry atop the turd sundae was when Trump, in a single, albeit increasingly expected, surprise announcement, unleashed the Kennedy Kraken at a rally here in Phoenix, and no, I wasn't there. I was busy coughing up lung matter at the time. Now, those at all apprised of my opinion on America's presidents know I trust the Kennedys about as much as I trust the Kennedys. JFK was an SOB. He caused the Cuban Missile Crisis, dragged us into Vietnam, and no, he did not intend to leave, nor would he have ended the CIA. That quote about scattering them to the four winds was faker than Biden's teeth and only emerged long after his death, and his transition from hard silver to issuing silver certificates was intended to formally replace the gold standard with printable paper money, no matter how the cult of Kennedy cry, cope, and pretend he intended the opposite of his actual actions. Sped Kennedy was almost as bad a senator as he was a dinner date, though that's all water over the side of the bridge at this point. But RFK Jr., I kinda sorta like. Not in a principled sort of way, mind you. The man's more changeable than a Polish light bulb, and perhaps in an indirect way, that's arguably what endears him. In a Washington populated by partisan hackmen half-assedly uttering their ideologue obligato in increasingly shrill refrains, RFK Jr.'s a guy who somewhat admirably is always willing to entertain the idea that he may at some point have been mistaken and rectifying his prior position as needed. With that said, the idea that RFK Jr. left the Democratic Party due to the COVID lockdowns exclusively, despite the fact that he didn't actually do so until 2 years after the lockdown's conclusion, is about as easy for me to swallow as a radial snow tire. But the man's harder to hate than a newborn puppy, and for that reason, not to mention his stunningly overrated surname, he would have made an eminently electable president, if only his voice didn't sound like a lawnmower trying and repeatedly failing to start. Sure as shit it's shallow, but folks, we elected Obama for his skin tone and reading skills. The bar to become leader of the free world is so low, Ben Shapiro could crab walk over it. The question I kicked around in rant number 1 was simple. Does an independent RFK campaign keep Trump from returning to the White House? And I argued therein that no. While RFK would carve off the commander-in-chief's support ever so slightly in certain places, meaning in some states it'd be closer shaved than Whoopi Goldberg's eyebrows, in my eyes, the RFK Jr. campaign provided little more than a non-pinko place to land for leerin' never-Trumpers not quite ready to buy the Kamala Harris hug pillow, or the small but increasingly alienated blue dog Democrat bloc that haven't had a rational electoral choice since they planted Joe Lieberman. Your mileage may differ, but that was how I interpreted those particular tea leaves, and you might therefore argue I should then dismiss RFK's endorsement as immaterial. After all, if he wasn't going to cost Trump his Terminator 2 presidential sequel, how could he conceivably pull his thumb out of his ass and put it onto the scales of the election, swaying it all for the Orange Man? And the answer is simple. An act of unbridled, unrepentant, unmistakable, open Kamala's maw, insert Kennedy cock, cataclysmic spite!
I'm sure this is a sensitive subject, but I can't help but notice that you ran for 15 months with no Secret Service protection at all. You were denied that by the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Trump, during the convention in Milwaukee last month, noted that in public. They immediately, under pressure, responded and gave you Secret Service protection.
Yes.
Now they've withdrawn it. You're without it again.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes. I did not terminate my campaign. Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So, I'm running in there's 10 states where I heard President Trump, and they're battleground states. So I've taken my name off the ballot in those 10 states. But in the blue states, all red states, I'm on the ballot.
And before you blow this off as impotent posturing, considering that the DNC are apoplectically, bowel-evacuatingly terrified enough that they are actually suing the RFK campaign at present to keep Kennedy on the ballot in states where it could cut the lead for Trump in twain.
Why is the Democratic Party suing me in frivolous cases?
On what
I spent a whole week in a trial for that case. For 2 cases they brought, and another week in another trial. It's costing me $10 million to defend myself.
But don't believe my mouth in motion, though I stand stymied I would ever even think of uttering the following words. Let us allow CNN to elucidate the issue.
Today, RFK Jr. had suspended his campaign, endorsing Trump. Kennedy telling reporters that Trump had asked him to, quote, enlist him in his administration. Now, the latest swing state polls show Kennedy with 5 or 6% of the vote. And so when you think about it overall, you may say, well, that's not a big deal. Actually, if that is the case in swing states, it is huge. It is everything. It is more than the margin between Harris and Trump in some of those same states.
Talk is about the only thing that's cheap in the Biden-Kamala economy, but it's the Kamala campaign's actions that are holding a 9-hour colloquium of cope. Put it this way, less than 48 hours after Kennedy criticized this socialist sea hag for dodging interviews like Trump at a shooting gallery, she acceded to the very first shit-down interview of her presidential campaign.
The most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed.
Wait for it.
In 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania. Sure. Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020.
Think that happens if she was ever 11 points ahead in the aggregate? Her handlers and the mongoloid media can spin like a spirograph all they want. Let them claim she's more popular than procreation, that the sun rises when Kamala cracks a smile, and her farts are an elixir vitae for vag cancer. If the polls with 14-plus leads were even reality adjacent, Kamala's lawyers wouldn't be hang-glided into Michigan to keep a dude who done dropped out of the race on the ballot. What we are witnessing is 2016 on speed, which is apropos as most pollsters have resoundingly and in some cases deliberately refused to alter their professionally flawed methodology since they overestimated both Biden and Hillary's support by double damn digits. Anyone recall the self-same juncture in the 2016 spin cycle when pinko pollsters were hand-jiving themselves because they had Hillary at 7 to 12 points ahead? Given those particular givens, I'd argue Kennedy absolutely pushes the needle, which is marginally ironic given his stance on the clot shot. Although one look at his Jack LaLanne steroidally suffused physique confirms RFK's issue isn't so much with syringes as with their contents. Folks, Kamala Harris is shitting her pantsuit. Every battleground state where RFK removes himself in favor of T-Pain is just another needle in her voodoo doll. But honestly, who didn't see this coming after the recent Agent 47 attempt on Trump? After all, when Biden, Kamala, and every alphabet agency under the red sun of Krypton is gunning for your orange ass, who better to draw their fire than a Kennedy? I'm Razor Fist! Godspeed!
You have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down.
Wait for it.
Everyday prices are too high. It feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. The bills add up. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes, prescription medication, the cost of food. A loaf of bread costs 50% more. Ground beef is up almost 50%.
I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I approve this message.